This is a story of risky behavior.
Fear.
We could see the train wreck coming.
If you have only 1 or 2 or 3 buyers for your product, then you're very likely to face a situation where these buyers are able to exercise market power over you, and your price is going to be bid down relative to what it's worth.
So that was the panic.
When push came to shove and we got pushed to lower and lower prices, everyone was worse off. The whole industry went down.
Well, I never thought about myself as an evil genius, but maybe I am. I don't know.
This is the story of a negotiation, a bargaining association, and how it died. Terry Barton was the manager of the California Pear Growers Association when what's about to happen in this documentary actually happened. Terry was the first to realize that the story of what happened to the pear growers would be valuable to growers in any commodity who are trying to make up their minds. We were so impressed with the presentation that he's been giving to grower groups that we decided to make it into a movie. This is Terry giving his presentation. Note the notes.
Here's a main one. Thanks for the opportunity to tell you the story of what really happened to the California pear growers a few years ago and why they failed. I'm hoping the story will be useful to growers and managers of other ag associations, and perhaps you'll be able to use some of the mistakes that we made, learning about our mistakes, and help you avoid them in the future. One of the main problems we had, of course, was not enough membership to control the crop. So you have to ask yourself the question, why do growers avoid membership and when they know it will benefit everybody? The biggest reason of all for not joining the association is the fear of not having a home for the fruit. Fear the cannery will discriminate. Fear that processors will brand them as radicals or anti-cannery. Fear that membership in the association will reduce their option. For example, membership agreement with the association prevents them from selling excess fruit for less than the established price if they, just to get rid of it. So they'd like to be able to cut their own deal on the side to wheel and deal under the umbrella of the association. So this fear really is one of the main reasons that caused the demise of the California pear growers. In 2002, the price for pears was settled at $235 a ton. So when we began to negotiate the price in 2003, we received a letter from Signature Foods, one of the large processors, with an offer of a flat price for the next 3 years. Well, we'd never had a 3-year price structure before, so it looked attractive, but the price was down to $190 a ton. But I haven't mentioned the worst part of the offer yet. They gave us an ultimatum. If we didn't like their offer, they'd send a letter to all the non-members saying they would accept contracts on a first-come, first-served basis until their needs were met. Well, what'll help you understand this a little better is the CEO of Signature Fruit was actually my predecessor at the Pear Growers, so he knew all the weak spots in our rules.
Then you've got this odd situation with somebody who used to sit in your chair, yes?
Yes.
Is now leading Company A.
Yes.
Tell me how you felt going into that negotiation. Did you feel like it was going to be more amicable as a result?
Yes, I did.
Describe your sense going in.
When they formed the new entity, they were looking for a CEO. And I called this fella who was unemployed at the time and told him about it. So he contacted him. I told him who the headhunter was. And anyway, he got the job. So, I thought we had a pretty good relationship. But it turned out differently than I had expected. How did I feel about it? I was very optimistic that things would go very well. They knew the score. They knew how difficult it was for the growers to grow stuff. He knew the financial situation that they were in. He knew all of those things, and I felt that he would be more sympathetic, I guess, to the growers. But I suppose the bottom line and the return on investment numbers, and it just prompted him as the CEO. So he knew all the weak spots in our rules. Our bylaws allow growers to resign by the end of December. So Signature's offer was made in early December. And they wanted to send out this letter to the non-members in January. This meant that if someone wanted a home at Signature Fruit, he had to resign from the association. Growers were afraid. They were afraid to stick together. They were afraid to anger the processor. And as I said, they were afraid they would ultimately lose the home for their fruit. So during December, a number of the frightened growers resigned from the association. So this now meant there were enough non-members to supply most of Signature's needs. This seriously weakened our bargaining power, and Signature was able to take advantage of it. From January to March, we met with Signature a number of times. There were several offers and counteroffers, but the bottom line price didn't change very much. It was always below the cost of production. Meanwhile, they kept threatening us with this ultimatum. So in one meeting, we told them that if they did that, we would react in several ways. We would file an unfair bargaining complaint with the state. We'd file an injunction to prevent this action. We'd launch some kind of a PR campaign to drag their glorious name through the mud. But as a result of this, the CEO said, no, wait a minute, no need for such harsh action. Bargaining's going along fine, so there's really no need for the ultimatum letter. And about that same time, we concluded negotiations with the other major processor, Del Monte. We received normal terms and conditions with an average price of $218. Remember that the other price was $190. So we felt this was lower than we wanted because the previous year we had, was at $235. But it was a way to get started, so we were happy with it. Well, just after that, without notice, Signature reneged on their process. They sent out the ultimatum letter anyway to non-members, and we were in for it. They quickly called the non-members and told them, well, you have to sign now or the tonnage will go to somebody else. In addition, there might be more volume available to you because some other people, particularly the association, may not sign up. This meant that the association, if we didn't sign, well, the contract was up to 5 years. So by this time, so there would be no contracts for the association member for 5 years. Well, the non-members panicked, and they took this 5-year price for roughly $198 a ton. That's $20 a ton, or about 10% less than what Del Monte had already accepted, and $37 a ton, or about 16% less than the previous year. This was a loss of about $7 million, and it would last for 5 years. So you're looking at somewhere around $35 million in our industry. Well, naturally, the board and the grower members panicked. They feared doing anything would jeopardize their ability to get a home. And so basically the board capitulated, Signature won, and in addition to that, we had to drop Del Monte's price to the same as Signature, so we lost another several $1 million.
Well, I actually started with my grandfather when I was about 2-3 years old. We used to come up here all the time, and I worked with him on his farm up the road here a piece, and he settled over here in the late 1800s. After the World War II, my dad bought this property here, and he and I farmed it over the years, and then my son and I now farm it as a partnership. We have pears, prunes, walnuts, and grapes.
My grandfather was involved in a startup company around the turn of the century called Pacific Fruit Exchange, and he was one of the partners. And they were a shipping company that primarily shipped fruits and vegetables out of California. The company took over the farm in the Delta, the 2 farms in the Delta was in 1929, prior to the Depression actually. So they got it at a fairly high price and then suffered through the Depression and to try to keep it operating, yeah. I was asked to serve on the board of the bargaining unit for the pear growers. Mm-hmm. And so I did. At a probably not too fortuitous time, but I had known many of the people and families involved in the business for many, many years because they had been family friends. from up in the Delta. So I felt comfortable working with these people.
Here in this valley, I can't speak to the river, but during that period of time, our pear growers here in the valley were making money. They were not getting rich, but they were covering their expenses and being able to do some capital improvements on their property.
We did not have the membership of all of the pear growers. And as a result, we had an association that did not take title to the fruit. And so it was really not it was in a position to bargain for a price, but it was always possible for a processor to go outside and get fruit. But generally, the policy was when we agreed upon a price, they paid that price across the board because we represented enough of the industry to do that. But it was always a weakness that we didn't have a solid front because not everyone was a member. And you know, it was obvious to both sides in the bargaining issue that that was the case.
Our big problem was we didn't have 100% of the tonnage. We were real short on the tonnage. And one of the things that really hurt us during that period was the packing sheds using their tonnage out the back door to the canneries. They were willing to sell it cheaper than the growers delivering 100% of all product to the market.
We had negotiated in good faith a price with Del Monte. It was a workable amount. You know, if we got that amount of money, I could look at my acreage and say, you know, if things go well, if we don't have any hail, we don't have any other problems, things like that, we can do okay with this price. We wouldn't make a lot of money, but we would cover our costs, because that's pear industry was getting to that point where the objective wasn't to make money. The objective was to cover your costs, and that price did it. So we were feeling pretty good about that when, as I recall, we suddenly received a notice that one of the other processors had put out a blanket reduction, saying they were willing to take on any large amount of tonnage at a particular price. So I mean, I think our negotiated price had been about $240 a ton, and they were talking about $200 a ton on a 5-year deal, which had a very small incremental raise every year. They made the offer to all of the large growers, especially those that weren't involved in the association. And then they turned to the association and said, and we'll sign up association members as well if you agree to these terms. So we're basically over a barrel.
And one day, Signature Fruit went into some of the major growers that had packing sheds and offered them a price, take it or leave it, and if they turned it down, they'd go to the next guy down the road. And it broke the price that year, and it broke the back of the bargaining association.
You could take this deal either at 2 years or at 5 years. So since we were collapsing here, I said, well, let's do the 2-year deal, re-solidify ourselves, get together, get everybody together when they realize what a bad deal it is, and then negotiate from strength. And everyone said, that's a great idea, Bob. Let's do that. You know, I think you're right. You know. So then when it came time to sign the contracts, I found out I was the only one that signed for the 2 years. Really? Everybody else had signed for 5 years. I was the single grower who had signed for 2 years. And it isn't so much that that really bothers me. Is why didn't they call me up and say, hey, you know, we're all going to go for 5 years. You should go for 5 years too, because you know otherwise you're going to be out of the market. But nobody did. You know, it's just you know, and these were friends.
My name is Rich Sexton. I'm a professor of agriculture and resource economics at the University of California, Davis, and I do teaching and research on the economics of agricultural cooperatives. The major antitrust legislation in the U.S. was put in place from about 1890, when the Sherman Act was passed, until the until about 1914. The concern at that point in time was that these laws would cause cooperatives to run afoul of them because of some of the things that they prohibited, such as joint marketing and collective action were precisely the types of things that farmers were trying to get in place during this period of time, because it was a period of low incomes for farmers, and there was a lot of concern about the market power of the processing firms. It was recognized that farmers were having a hard time, and so that there was the genuine belief that if they could act together through cooperatives, market jointly, and that they would be able to have a stronger footing in the marketplace. They would be able to counterbalance or counteract the power of a lot of the market intermediaries from whom they were or to whom they were selling. And so we were definitely during a period when policymakers were looking to do things to help out the farmers. The food supply is integral to any country and any economy, so you want to make sure that you have a robust agricultural economy, so that you want there to be that economic vitality in place. If there's being market power exercised by the buyers, it is going to have an adverse effect on the production. There's going to be less produced because prices are too low, and so if you can get a robust competitive marketplace going, it's going to benefit everybody, not just the farmers but the consumers, and it's just going to be a stable source in a very integral part of the economy.
Was there an expressed concern that you know of at the time that it might tilt the balance of power in favor of growers?
Well, there was a little undertone to that, and interestingly, Congress took care of that. They put a second section into the Capper-Volstead Act, which is known as the undue price enhancement section, which gives the Secretary of Agriculture the responsibility to investigate any claims that cooperatives have been using their Capper-Volstead Act protections to unduly enhance price. And interestingly, that clause has never once been implemented by the Secretary of Agriculture.
If I had standing in front of you a grower who was debating whether he should commit to his bargaining association or not, what would you tell him about this exception and the opportunity that it creates?
Well, it's an exception that other industries don't have, so it is a good opportunity, and in many cases it is a necessary opportunity, because if you have only one or two or three buyers for your product, then you're very likely to face a situation where these buyers are able to exercise market power over you, and your price is going to be bid down relative to what it's worth.
We're telling the story of a group that really didn't exercise those rights. Does it strike an economist as something of an anomaly to be granted this opportunity and not really use it to the fullest?
Well, probably it does, and I've talked to people outside of agriculture who don't understand that those types of protections are in place, and they do think, well, wow, there's a great opportunity, and certainly it's probably true over the history of the Act that farmers have not taken advantage of it the way that they could have and should have.
Can you remember a time when somebody from outside of the industry was talking to you about this and what they said?
Usually I'm traveling on some type of business purpose related to talking to a cooperative or something like that, and the response is, well, they must make all kinds of money then, and well, no, not necessarily.
So am I dumb not to commit?
Well, I don't want to say that necessarily, because but it's an opportunity that would not be there for producers in other industries. It's a tool that should be very seriously considered, and in many cases I think there are great advantages to doing it.
I don't think many of them sat down with pencil and paper and said, how much is fertilizer going to cost 3 years from now? What's the projection? How much has it gone up over the previous 3 years? Because I can't imagine that anyone thought that labor costs were going to go down, or that chemical costs were going to go down, or that, you know, energy costs were going to go down. I mean, no one could have projected that those things were going to go down.
Well, while I was on the board, one of the things we did for the last several years was we went on a real strong recruiting effort explaining the plight of the industry, because we could see the train wreck coming, but we just could never break through the packing sheds and a few growers that felt they had long-term safe contracts with the individual canners. And that was the weak point, that we just couldn't get the acreage to control, to have any leverage after that point with the bargaining association with the canners.
These guys felt they were big enough to negotiate their own deal, and they really didn't need the association. And they thought that by taking this deal, they would get larger contracts because the association members wouldn't have a cannery home. They'd have no place else to go with the fruit, so they'd have to sell it to the fruit sheds. Well, since the association eventually signed on as well, the result was the sheds didn't get any larger contracts. They got the same volume, but they got $37 a ton less. And $20 a ton less than what Del Monte had agreed to pay. So much for being large enough to negotiate your own price. If they went around the association, then they lost millions. As a result of this, we lost significant membership, significant tonnage in the association, and brought our total down to where we were no longer an effective bargaining unit. And since the price was fixed for 5 years anyway, who needed the association to do the bargaining? So basically, they put the association into hibernation. And naturally, we closed the office, laid off the staff, turned out the lights, and went home.
When push came to shove, and we got pushed to lower and lower prices in our bargaining unit, as the bargaining unit broke down and people were able to make side deals. The net effect of that was that everyone was worse off. The whole industry went down.
What's the first time you remember driving a truck?
When I was 6.
You want to tell that story?
Well, you know, my dad didn't have any. He had 4 boys, and I was the third of 4. But the rest of them didn't have. The older 2 didn't happen to be around, so he had to pick up some hay that was on the ground. We had an old 37 Dodge truck, flatbed, and he put it between 2 rows of bales and got me to stand on the seat and hold the steering wheel, and he put it in low gear and just said, steer it, don't hit the bales. And I'll come and catch it when we get to the end of the row, and I'll turn it around for you and we'll do it again. So that was my first experience driving a truck, was standing on the seat and holding a wheel. Had no control over the brakes, no control over the gas, and OSHA would have hated it.
Your dad was a member of a co-op?
Yes, he was a founding member of the Genesee Milk Producers Co-op. He was a board member and a director for, I guess, 20-some years, and he helped found that original co-op.
Degree in?
Ag economics, specialty in production economics, because my intention was always to go back and farm.
Which you did?
Which I did.
For how long?
Almost 4 years.
Dave went on to earn his PhD and over the years to work with the USDA as an analyst for a beer company and for several grower groups, including a stint heading up the California Pear Growers. In 2002, through a twist of business fate, he was brought back to the world of California pears, but this time on the other side of the table. What was Tri-Valley?
Tri-Valley was a large agriculture cooperative in California that in its heyday was almost $1 billion in sales, had a 33–35% market share of canned peaches, apricots, and pears. The co-op management, the co-op board, collectively together somehow bankrupted Tri-Valley.
What was Signature Foods?
Signature Foods was an attempt on the part of John Hancock Life Insurance, who ended up buying the assets out of bankruptcy because they'd been a big lender, and they were left holding the bag. They bought the assets out, and they named it Signature Fruit, and then they recruited me to get rid of the tomato assets as efficiently as I could and rebuild the fruit business so that the company could be sold to a third party. My goal was to develop a long-term strategy that would be beneficial for both the processor and the grower. Our market share during that period when Tri-Valley went into bankruptcy slipped down to about 20%. I had so many facilities, one of my goals was to get it back up to 33, roughly 33 to 35 from 20, and do it profitably and do it quickly. My interest in a 5-year agreement, or three or five, either one would have been fine, was that I wanted to be able to smooth out my cost structure, and I wanted to identify growers who were really committed to signature fruit, who would go the distance with us so that we could put higher quality in the product. Because if I could get them to give me a slightly higher quality out of the field, I could get better cannery yields, and my margins would go way up.
Now you're sitting on the other side of the table. Is it weird looking at the guy who has your old job?
I don't know that it's weird. It's, you know, in a way you can feel for him because he's got a job to do, but he should also know that you have a job to do.
Did you have an unfair advantage?
Probably because I had lots of years' experience. I had a lot of knowledge, maybe more than a lot of negotiators, because I had been on both sides.
How well did the negotiation move along?
It moved well. I don't remember it being a problem. I really don't remember anything being that negative about the whole process.
There was a letter to growers that has been described as the ultimatum letter. Do you remember what the ultimatum letter said?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I mean, it's been a lot of years, and I don't remember it being an ultimatum, or, you know, we always would send a letter out spelling out the terms and conditions of what we thought the deal was going to be. Was that an ultimatum? You know, maybe in retrospect they felt like it was. It certainly wasn't in our mind.
There was an intimation to it that was kind of first come, first serve, whether you're in the bargaining association or not. We just need the fruit.
Well, that would be a true statement. We needed the fruit, and that was our way of saying, if you choose not to, that's fine. But we are going to continue and try to recruit as much fruit as we can get.
The effect would have been, because they didn't have a really dominant membership, it would have effectively driven a rift between members and non-members as to who's going to jump first.
I don't know. I don't honestly know how to answer that one. I don't know that that's true. Maybe it is, but I don't honestly know. It doesn't strike me as being that being a probable outcome. It was the contract was offered to everybody out there, and the association was bargaining on behalf of, you know, the bulk of them. Clearly, we needed the association.
So we send out the letter. Then what happens?
Well, I don't remember any long period of time. I think they agreed to the agreement. You know, came back and signed it. I don't remember much about the details. Nobody got to the point where they were yelling and hollering about it. I don't recall, so I don't believe it was at the time that it was a big issue.
Do you remember who came first? Were there non-members who signed and then the members end up cascading in, or?
I don't recall. And quite frankly, I suspect the membership probably came forward as quickly as anybody.
They end up effectively putting the association on ice at this point because they figure they don't need it. There's not going to be any bargaining for the next 5 years. And the people who have not been entirely excited about the way the 5-year agreement planned out often paint you as a kind of evil genius who exercised his negotiating strategy with precision and efficiency. Are you an evil genius?
Anybody's entitled to any opinion they want, to tell you the truth. I always did my homework, and I believed very much in the long term. So maybe they viewed me as being some kind of an evil genius because I was always 3 and 4 years down the road in my thought process about where the company should position itself.
If 100% of non-members had become members and stood their ground and said, no, we don't like your 5 years, we don't like your pricing arrangement, that sort of thing, how do you think it would have played out at that point?
We'd have gone to a 1-year deal.
I'd been in business long enough myself outside of agriculture to know that the standard joke is, we'll lose a little on each piece and make it up in volume. And it is a joke. I think I saw it correctly that if we had waited 2 years and battled, we might have gotten somewhere. I know I saw it correctly by leasing the property and getting out of the business, that the 5-year thing was never going to work. every time the people that have leased our pears come out to talk about the pears or whatever else they say, you are so lucky you got out of this business when you did, because it's only gotten worse.
Another result of this, and sad result, is that many growers had gone bankrupt and they had either removed or abandoned their orchards. And in retrospect, a lot of this was unnecessary.
I guess the major weakness we had in these negotiations, weaknesses I guess, would be that not everybody was a member of the association. And even those that were members didn't always stick together on this because they put their own interests a little bit ahead. Much of that happened because the people outside the association who seemed to be willing, because we never know, seemed to be willing to take this deal that could then force everyone to take it.
It's important to point out at this point that I don't blame the cannery for any of this. Their job was to get cheaper pears. They did their job. They did it well. But the growers didn't do their job. None of this would have happened if they had stood together and worked together instead of running scared in different directions. The co-op laws give the farmer a tool to work together to negotiate for the best price through strength. So if you don't use the tool as it was intended, you'll end up in the same place as the Pear Association.
Would you have, with all your experience on both sides, would you have a message to non-members about the impact it has of them being outside on negotiations?
Well, sure. They're what we call free riders, and they think it's smart. And for a short-term basis, it is, but ultimately for the industry, it's not. You know, if they want a stronger industry, if they want a stronger, commodity program with a better long-term venue for their future production, for their next generation of kids who are going to become farmers, then being a free rider is putting it all more at risk.
People felt they had legitimate reasons not to belong, but they were never legitimate economic reasons. They were reasons that went to other things, because from an economic standpoint, it'd be very hard to argue that it wasn't a good idea to stand together when you're bargaining for price. Now, there's always going to be conflicts of interest in bargaining associations, because there's going to be very big growers and some very small growers, and growers that are more diversified and growers that are only growing that crop. And so we tend to evaluate every deal on whether or not that deal is a good deal for me and my particular business. And believe me, I did it. Everyone does it. Whatever you end up doing, you have to compromise in order to stay together. Because if you only put your interests first, then you can't have a unified face. And believe me, it's very obvious when you don't to your opponents. If you're in a negotiation and you are weak because people are not willing to stay together, it becomes obvious to the people you're negotiating with.
Well, if you don't come up with a win-win situation, it's very disappointing, particularly when you have to let the staff go and turn out the lights and go home. That's very disappointing. This job that I did for years for Pear Growers was a very rewarding job. You could go and visit growers and they would say, "Oh, you did a great job, and so happy you got a price that." They're not happy. They'd like more, but they're happy that we started negotiating here and you were able to get a few more dollars, and that makes them all happy. One of the things about this job that I liked so much was people always appreciated what you did. And, you didn't get that in every place in corporate America, people say thank you, and they were happy to see you when you came down the road for the most part.
And hopefully the people will remember the history of what happened and get more people involved and be more cohesive.
A couple of years into the 5-year deal, most growers had figured out that it wasn't going their way, and efforts were begun to reconstitute the group. They reworked the bylaws, assembled a new board, and reduced the fees. Now, 85% of acres are ascribed to the group, and an even higher percentage of growers are members. 5 large players, 2 of whom were never members, and 3 who had pulled out of the group at the deadline, have been instrumental in the reformation of the organization. In fact, 2 of them now sit on the board. In pairs, anyway, one gathers that the risks are now fully understood. We hope this documentary serves to illuminate the size of the risk in not putting your Capper-Volstead rights to work, so that if you should find yourself in a similar circumstance, you don't have to go through what the pear growers did to get wise. You know, we talked to almost everyone in the pear world for this documentary. You'll notice, though, that only a handful were willing to go on camera. Not surprisingly, most of those who did no longer have anything to do with pears. There were many excuses for not joining this project. For some, there was hesitancy about going before the camera at all, and others might even be a bit embarrassed by some of their past choices. But the reason given more than any other was, we don't want to risk offending our processor. Some risks never change.
Thank you.